Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation of the Front-End Trap, helping engineers stay in their zone of excellence, presented by Retool and D-Zone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Bavoso, and I'll be serving as your host. The goal of today's session is to help you ease the tension that might be growing in your engineering teams because your developers are being pulled back and forth between back-end productivity and front-end demands. Today, we'll show you how to empower your engineering teams to draw clearer boundaries so they can stay focused on what they do best. Because happy engineers are productive engineers. And I'm excited to be joined today by Madeline Clark, Technical Product Marketing Manager at Retool. A quick note before we get started, feel free to use the chat feature to comment on the presentation as we go today. We'll be having a Q&A session after today's presentation, so please drop any questions you have in the chat as they come up. Now, please join me in welcoming Madeline Clark. Hi, Mads.
Hi, Katie. So good to be here with everybody.
So great to have you, and thank you for joining me today. Now, Mads, I have to point out, you're a product marketer, but you do have quite a technical background. So why don't you start out by telling us about that background, because you too know the pain of managing the front end and full stack development. So what led you to where you are now?
Sure. So I started out my early career in a non-technical field entirely, studied political science and human rights, was in New York City trying to do that, an unpaid internship, and the economic realities of that career path really came crashing down pretty quickly. And so I wanted to learn a skill or something quick and effective that I could do to, advance my career and maybe start building things, doing things my way. So I went to a coding boot camp. Back in 2016, when I went to one a while back, there was a very heavy emphasis on full stack, like web development. That was the school of thought that I went to and was trained on. And so after I graduated that boot camp, I ended up as a full stack web dev, but ended up spending a lot of my time building front ends. It was really interesting. And that was where a lot of the more junior folks from that boot camp, right, were kind of stuck into, was this, we were expected to own the full stack, understand it. Our resumes had to have all the different languages, all of the technologies, but there was a constant trade-off between what we were actually doing and what we wanted to do. I wanted to solve problems. I wanted to build cool apps. And obviously, I wanted to grow into a more senior role. But I was spending a lot of time pixel pushing and like fighting through old CSS that I hadn't even written. So after a couple of years of banging my head against the wall on that, I realized, and you guys will sort of hear, I'm very verbose. I'm also a clinically diagnosable extrovert, I call myself. I had a hard time being just in coding, and I was in kind of a siloed team. So I was like, all right, I'll try product management. Really loved it. Moved from that into product marketing because I was able to tell more stories and do a little bit more of the fun activities like webinars that I love. So it's been a very non-linear path that brought me here, but I've been at Retool for about a year and a half now and absolutely love working here and love doing events like this with you guys, with different parties, and connecting with the audience that actually uses products like I do.
Amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to your presentation today, so I'll fully pass the baton to you and let you get started.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much, Katie. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to walk through the front-end dilemma, the front-end trap. How can we move beyond this, right, and keep your engineers, or you, if you're an engineer, in your zone of excellence? I love that phrase. Where can you flourish? Where can you find your joy? But like, what makes you excellent? And how do we keep you there? Without further ado, the front-end dilemma. What is it? Where are we today, and how do we get here? If I could see you all on Zoom, I'd say raise your hand if you've heard of the myth of the full stack developer. Hopefully many of you have. If you haven't, this is a concept that's been around actually since about 2014, but I can walk you through the chronology of how we got to the myth of the full stack developer and some of the pressure that it puts on individual developers and teams even today. So back in 2008, the term full stack really took off in hiring. We started seeing it. We started seeing this need for folks to market themselves and to fit this like very large, broad jack of all trades sort of coding position. And you started to see it really pop up in marketing and hiring materials. In 2010 through about 2014, that was like the golden heyday. And funny enough, that was right before I myself was looking for a job in this space. And this is where, every resume and every job description had that full stack, golden word in it. And that's what we were trained and pushed to identify as. And that was really the expectation that was put on engineers in general. By 2014, the first sort of anchor, cornerstone blog posts or posts on Hacker News were starting to come out about like, wait a minute, can one individual truly be a master of the full stack? Is that something that we should aspire to? Is that something the pressure that we should put on the folks that we're training up to be engineers, or the ones who have found their niche already and are maybe starting to be pulled in this full stack direction? And so that criticism really set in 2014. By 2017, 2018, the idea that the full stack superhero existed and there really could be someone who's truly an expert across every single piece of the stack, every language, every framework, that the idea that was unrealistic started becoming mainstream. But it's 2025 and we still hear it, right? It still persists. And so the take on the myth that I see today is there is still this like, there's a mystical person. I know maybe one of them in my personal life, if I can think of all the devs I hang out with, like there are some very intentional full stack engineers who absolutely love the context switching. They probably played hacky sack in the 90s. Like they love wearing lots of different hats. And they truly feel like they are experts in all of those different pieces. Like that is a small portion of the folks that we hear from. And again, like I think that's a very difficult role to fill. But what we're seeing more today with the pressures of the pressures of software development and delivery in general, what we're seeing more of are these reluctant specialists, somebody who's really chosen a path that they want to go down. That are getting dragged between lots of different projects with a huge cognitive load. It's a really high price to pay for them to actually build something from start to finish. And so I pulled out, just some quote, like a quote from somebody on Hacker News, right? Somebody who's actually living and breathing in this world, who is a backend developer. We're seeing this backend persona. We're seeing the folks who focus on more of the backend side of the stack, it increasingly being pushed to produce UIs or just figure out the front end. For some folks, there's even, I don't agree with this, but there is a perception that front end is easier. So any good backend engineer can just learn it. I think most of us know that's not true, but it does persist. And so Eric Devon here was saying that he was trying to construct a front end app, and it took him 20 minutes to realize that a table with 1,000 elements had a million different buttons led to the slow response of just displaying a modal. The complexity and fragmentation of trying to spin up something simple on the front end actually can be incredibly complex. And for a lot of folks, the back end does just feel much more straightforward. This is the mindset of a lot of folks going into app development today. And that a potential piece of the front end side of full stack that perhaps the folks submitting the PRDs or expecting full stack results are not as aware of. And so, like I said, even though I think within the community, within some of the thought pieces being exchanged between developers, we are still seeing that teams are expected to do more full stack work with fewer front end resources. We're seeing a lot fewer front end specialists coming out of college or boot camps or moving into the career. And we are seeing, between economic constrictions and the upward and right march of producing more, producing faster, increasing revenue for the company, being innovative, all of those like macro pressures are leading and compounding into needing to deliver more complete apps and do that full stack work with fewer resources. I pulled out some data. I usually don't like to just throw numbers at people, but I think when they tell a good story, it's worth putting it on a slide. Retool, we were working with a consulting firm who gave us some recruiting data when they were looking from seed to Series C hiring. What were the roles that all the companies they were working with were trying to fill? Only 5% of those roles were front end. The rest were, the vast majority were back end and full stack. So there's still this kind of this dichotomy, right, of the needs of the market, the needs of developing an application, and then what's actually being sourced, what's actually being hired for. And so while we see a lot of this pressure and we don't have the front-end resources to actually fill it, whether that is a net new person or true expertise in a front-end stack, we're seeing a trend of quiet hiring. And I've seen this across lots of different industries, but in this particular instance, what we're seeing in tech teams and dev teams is an emphasis on trying to grow team capabilities through internal mobility and forced upskilling. So essentially hiring smart, and smart, maybe not in quotes, I just mean smart people often can be shorthand for somebody who we expect will pick this up quickly. If we say, all right, this person needs to go build the whole application, don't know front end, great, you got to learn it. And that's part of being an engineer. And again, there's also like a wonderful push and pull there. Professional development is awesome. Being forced into it and have to grow in ways that are not natural or interesting or excellent for you, that can be really challenging and lead to a lot of feelings of burnout and a lot of dissatisfaction in the role. And so what we're seeing, kind of on the team side or the expectation side is you build it, you run it. You've heard that. It's turning into you build it, you run it, and you figure out and maintain the UI. So the pressure is just mounting. And so all of that, right, I've walked us through kind of the mythology of the full stack hero. That does bring us to this front end dilemma, is we've got these backend engineers who are forced to context switch into a lot of these unfamiliar frameworks and tools and coding patterns, which we see over and over, right? It kills productivity. It increased costs across the board, like obviously financially, right? It's burning time, which means money. But again, it's also leading to a lot of fatigue and burnout. And from sort of a tech side and an excellence and delivery side, this is that context switching and the lack of expertise skill that people are being forced to fill does in fact create a lot of tech debt and doesn't let the smart driven folks that you've hired focus on their core expertise. And so, okay, we've got our dilemma. Obviously, it does sound super painful, but I did want to dive in a little more to, okay, how is this actually, what are some of the tangible pains that we're seeing? And maybe start putting it a little bit more in the individual lens and the team lens as well. And so I really want to double click on this concept that context switching kills productivity and breaks flow. So for the individual engineer, right, every time they have to toggle back and forth between working on the business logic or the database or the architecture or anything that they've been tapped to build for an application, for a piece of software, for any kind of data engineering that they're doing, right? Whatever that deep skill set for them is, if they have to switch into a entirely new mode of thinking and new framework and new coding language, we know, like neuroscience knows that human brains don't like doing that and do take a hit, right? There's literally a slowdown. We found that it takes on average 9.5 minutes to actually get focus back after switching applications, after switching from the modes that you're working in, the front end and back end modes that you're working in. In the same developer survey, right, we saw that 45% of the folks felt less productive, like they internalized it and articulated that I feel way less productive from this context switching. And another about 43% felt super fatigued. And so one of the folks that we were speaking to said, like, right, here's just all the things that I'm dealing with in a given day. I'm switching branches in my IDE. Maybe I'm switching to a totally different IDE. I'm closing and reopening browser tabs. I'm recreating environments. I'm waiting for something to compile. I'm jumping between Slack. Like there is an inherent, there's going to be a lot of context switching that is necessary to do the job that we've been hired to do. I'd say maybe across roles, across teams, across industries, but definitely in tech, we're going to be doing a lot of that context switching. But anything that we can do to minimize it is going to open up some of that fatigue and some of that that brain drag that we see. And not just from switching between kind of contexts, right? Like digging in and out of different ideas or workflows or ways that you were approaching development. Literal framework fatigue is also real. So I'd say this one, I am super personally familiar with this one as well. My very first job was doing a lot of vanilla JavaScript, and I guess hot take, I loved it. But obviously the number of frameworks and the complexity of them has been proliferating, and that is not about to stop with all of the different AI code gen tools that are popping up, all the different ways that we're trying to get around this kind of like reactify everything concept, right? The fatigue of all these different libraries, frameworks, applications is very, very real. And so if I'm sitting here thinking, I just want to build an app, just want to ship it, Why am I grappling with new frameworks that are super short-lived, right? Why am I switching from an Angular to a Vue to whatever the latest thing is? And maybe the latest thing has a tiny community, but my senior manager was really passionate about that one framework and dropped me into it. And now that's the only one I know. Shouting out to some of the ones I learned in my coding bootcamp, right? Why am I always turning over, right? I finally learned something to make this a little easier and then it's out the door. I have to learn all the different shifting network of pack configs, of migrations, troubleshooting, security vulnerabilities, right? I've got to do all of this just to build a functional app. That's extremely, extremely fatiguing and super frustrating to navigate. And so those are like many of the individual pains that you're feeling at kind of the development level, but those as any kind of individual pain is going to translate at scale to serious consequences of business impact. And so Katie said at the very beginning of this slide, right? Like happy developers are productive developers. That is like the philosophy I take from every company, from every conversation that I have in my personal or professional life. Like happy employees are productive employees. And the business case for that, the business side of that is unhappy and unfocused teams, they quit, they churn. They are not productive. If they do stay, maybe they're locked in either from golden handcuffs or security concerns, like job security concerns, whatever it is, work is going to slow down. So even if you're not seeing literal turnover of your engineers and frustration bubbling up and, HR exit interviews, there is a noticeable slowdown of quality and velocity in the teams that are unhappy and unfocused. Obviously, we're also going to see bugs and delays, right? When there's a lot of context switching and your brain is fatigued and your team is fatigued and they're being pulled in all these different directions, mistakes are going to get made. And they may not be caught as quickly because there's not that attentiveness. There's not that expert who's on call for the one thing that builds it super well and then also can troubleshoot or send it to someone to vet to approve the PR. You're going to see bugs, which lead to delays, and delays lead to decreased revenue, right? There's a really big snowballing effect here that's super real and needs to be addressed. A lot of the framework fatigue and context switching and sort of lack of familiarity of a lot of the different pieces necessary to build exquisite front ends today can lead to poor architecture because, again, you have non-experts jumping in, trying to learn and doing their best job for sure. But again, when they're not focused on their expertise, it's going to be imperfect. There's going to be some challenges there and things may not fit perfectly. And then last, the apps that are actually delivered. So at the end of the day, as all of this is going, right, we finally get to shipping the app or the agent or whatever the piece of software is that we're developing. The final application may meet all the PRD requirements. It may look and sound like what was described as wanting to be delivered, but because it wasn't built by folks in their zone of excellence, right, it might miss the mark. It may not actually deliver the functionality or the impact that was expected at the get-go. And so with all of these super real pains and challenges and problems, how can we start actually peeling some of that back and allowing folks to stay in the zone of excellence without it feeling like a trade-off? And I think that's really, I'm pausing here before we go into kind of, this is like the second half of a lot of the concepts we're going to talk about today. How can we turn this into a reality for us, for teams we manage, and for our departments, right? The ones that we have to sort of share back upward. How can we allow folks to stay in their zone of excellence without losing velocity? So we'll walk through a couple of high-level strategies, and then we'll talk about some of the tools on the market and how you can leverage those to solve this dilemma as well. The first recommendation that I can share with you folks is it's really important to encourage T-shaped skills. Now, the next couple slides are going to be phrased more for team managers or folks, tech leads, folks who have some influence on their of the folks who report to them. But I encourage all the ICs as well to take this as like a personal mandate too. And that's how I'm reading it and perceiving it. So think about developing your T-shaped skills or encouraging the T-shaped skills of your engineers. For those who aren't familiar with what a T-shaped skill set is, imagine literally a T, right? You go really broad in a lot of things, but you go very, very deep in one. And so that's a way that allows that deep specialization in an area, but also gives the individual and the team, right, a really solid working knowledge of the whole ecosystem. So think about from a team perspective, right? It gives an individual and your team members a working knowledge of the stack that you're using, of the departments that you interface with, the processes that you are working on, that you can look at it from that lens. But then also from a professional development perspective, right? You can invest some of your time in learning some of the newest frameworks and learning the newest tools. Again, like a lot of this content was written before a big explosion of the front-end code gen tools were on the market. And we're constantly rethinking about some of the we're constantly thinking about some of the framing that we need to do. It is absolutely essential that there is time and encouragement for that broad skill set to be developed. But, my case to you guys today, to you folks today, is that cannot be at the cost of allowing that deep specialization, sort of the bar of the T, to take root as well. So my call to all of you folks, right? Make room for that specialization and then share the load of generalization. Pass it around. Don't just have one person on your engineering team be the jack of all trades, right? Because that puts a lot of cognitive load on them and a lot of pressure, and creates kind of a single point of failure, which is really challenging, especially if you are an engineering team that's getting a lot of requests from other departments to build things for them, right? A lot of those more general requests are going to be shot to that one person. And that's not fair and it's not efficient. It's not an efficient way. So make room for that. Build up better collaborators who understand these trade-offs. Talk about it openly, right? This is the efficiency of a team should be a shared goal. It should be a shared experience between managers and ICs and executives, right? We want everyone to understand the trade-offs between, okay, if I'm going to go deep in one area, if I'm going to learn this as my specialization, or if we're going to hire for someone in this specialization, we know that the trade-off is that maybe they don't have a complete or comprehensive understanding of each side of the front end side of the equation. And so we want to build up a lot of different folks who have that perspective, who have that understanding, and they can collaborate together better, and work as kind of rise the team together. What is it, like the high tide rises all boats? Think about that when you think about upskilling your team. And then last, when you have encouraged, right, these T-shaped skills, you can help teammates handle tasks outside of their wheelhouse without getting blocked. So when there is kind of a base level knowledge of all the general parts of the stack and the parts of the way that your dev teams work, you can kick some of the requests among different teammates and help folks unblock themselves. The second sort of advice, or the second way we can solve this, right, is equipping teams with the right resources. So we want to think about, the last slide was all about encouraging kind of a mindset or a culture in your team or within yourself. Now it's about getting armed with the right tools. With the proliferation of tools on the market, it's ever more important to select the right ones and to go into any kind of tool acquisition or resource acquisition very intentionally. And so if you do that right, you can turn every project, so everything you're building, into fuel for faster and more consistent development. So essentially compound the value of everything you build as much as you can by making things reusable, by identifying the tasks that have undifferentiated complexity, right? So think about all the stuff that doesn't need to be handled by expert, that doesn't need to be done bespoke every single time you're building an application or a piece of software or solution, and free up the teams and the folks on them to focus on work that only they can do. This takes a little bit of assessment, right? Like think about the unique and differentiated work that your team or you as an individual can do and can bring to the table, and figure out a way to balance the load and equip folks with the right tools and resources to actually let that flourish. And so what that looks like from a practical perspective, right? The resources perspective, externally, right? Bring in or invest in an application development platform. Give folks a way to sort of leapfrog over the mundane, the boilerplate of setting up apps, of setting up front end, of setting up any piece of the development lifecycle, right? Invest in the platforms that actually accelerate that for you. It's going to return, tenfold for you guys in terms of productivity and quality of life. And then secondly, within that, right, within whatever tool stack you end up with, build a reusable library of components and primitives to keep compounding that value. So when you build something, make sure it's not throwaway. Make sure that it can be reused and becomes an integral part of the stack and the team that you're building with. Okay. For the next part, I wanted to take a little bit of a specific focus on this kind of post-AI world. I've mentioned it here and there over the first part of my presentation, but as we move forward in summer of 2025 and beyond, I'm very curious to see what the next iteration of this webinar will be. Who knows what the market will look like in another 6 months, but we want to talk a little bit about how some of the AI point solutions that have come into play and the front-end code gen tools have changed the game for developers. If anything, the proliferation of these AI code gen tools have made the full stack pressure even bigger. They've totally intensified it. Everything that I'm seeing, everything that we are seeing in the market, right, is especially from a top-down perspective, the idea that everyone should be full stack has really started feeling like, well, with AI, everyone can be full stack. And I want to be super sensitive to the way this section is presented, and share that like this is very much a dialogue within myself, within the market. Like there's a balance to be struck here. This is not in any way intended to say AI is terrible. It's not. I'm actually going to go through in the next couple slides like what are some ways that you can effectively use AI tools. But while the entire sort of industry is getting up to speed on what really is like what are the capabilities that are encapsulated in a lot of the AI tools that we're seeing, and how does that change the way we expect teams to work and expect developers to perform? There's a lot to be done. There's a lot of growing room there, and I'm seeing that friction come out a little bit. And so again, we know that things like Cursor, things like AI Assist, Copilot, if you're not using GitHub Copilot somewhere, I would be surprised, right? I think something like 70% of developers are using that every day right now. Get it, right? Those coding tools have and can make devs somewhere between 10 and 40% faster. And even if that stat doesn't resonate with you, it's like, what does that mean, faster? Like we are counting it in hours, but think about what you're able to build when you use one of those tools. That's excellent. But again, that's intensifying the pressure to like produce full stack everywhere all at once. And it's perpetuating the expectation that, let's say, if you are a junior developer, if you are front-end specialist, or if you're a back-end specialist, that you are now able to produce and develop across all layers at all sort of bars of quality. And we know that's not totally true just yet. And so a good AI tool should augment and amplify the expertise of the person using it that is still required for quality and maintainable apps, agents, and software. So this is the very positive message here, right? Where there be dragons, there are some worries about this pressure, but when AI is used well, when it's used skillfully, it should be an amplifier for what your team is already really good at. The second sort of angle that we take a look at here, right, is there is still, as exciting as it can be, and if you're the kind of person who comes to a webinar like this, and you're staying up to date in the field, in the industry, you might be seeing, right, that there has been all this hype. You might be trying all the different tools that are proliferating. You might be able to, you're going to all the talks and hearing all the thought leadership. We are kind of at the cutting edge, right? We are at the cutting edge of this industry. And of this particular cultural shift in it. But not everyone in the tech industry is, right? There actually is still a really big gap between what AI has promised and what we've expected and what we kind of talk about sort of in the visionary and the abstract, and what is happening sort of on the ground, especially at bigger companies, at companies with more legacy software, at companies with different challenges than, right, just getting up to speed and prototyping something on your individual laptop. It's a huge gap between that. And so from a business perspective, right, we're seeing an increasing sentiment that, all right, we collectively, right, the industry has poured billions of dollars into AI. The investments from VC, the initiatives that are being kicked off at really high levels, right? There's a lot of money going into this, but there's still an ROI gap. There's definitely still room to grow and still progress to be made on turning that investment into real impact in delivery, in velocity, in the types and quality of applications that are actually being shipped today. We're closing it, but right now it's still really big. And on the developer side, like I was mentioning, there are some excellent tools for prototyping and something, like speaking apps into existence that we're not there yet, but we're there with combining lots of different tools to turn an idea into an application. That's amazing. That, like, it's so exciting to be here in the summer of 2025 and know that that is a possibility, and that every, you know, development platform, every company that looks kind of like mine is working to get all these pieces of functionality into their offering, so that we can continue providing this experience and making it a reality for developers at all levels, at all companies. That's awesome. What we're not seeing yet, right, across the board, I'm talking from a very macro perspective, we're not seeing every team and every toolkit equipped with intelligent tools that are context aware, right? So they can actually connect to your resources that have the context of your development style, your best practices, your stack, your data sources, right? We're not seeing tools that have all that context, that adhere to your conventions, right? The way that you have set up development and deployment within your team or your organization, and are backed by robust tests. Like some stuff, I'm seeing a lot more software being shipped with no tests, and that is, to my former dev heart, just absolutely terrifying and heartbreaking. But I'm saying, like, these are somewhere between functionality and intentionality gaps that need to be closed by the AI tools if we want them to be if we want them to meet the sort of visionary North Star that we've set for them. So there's still a long way to go, but when we use AI intelligently, when we actually apply tools where they should be applied, when we take our own expertise and use it as an augmentation, that's super exciting. And that's another great way that we can start closing this gap a little bit with the front-end dilemma. And so where the market stands today, right? I think I mentioned a little bit of this, the positive trends. We're seeing a lot of the positive impact, but I wanted to take a minute and focus as well on these remaining challenges. So let's say, you know, we were talking GitHub Copilot increases productivity. We've got Cursor and all these IDEs that are super successful when they're combined with the right LLMs. We see these positive trends. But even as that advances forward, there's actually this sort of third pillar, this third perspective on the challenges that folks are facing today, it's challenges that these AI tools are introducing and facing today. And so those remaining challenges are really around security risks and quality versus speed. And this is something I see every single day in my role as a TPMM here at Retool, is lots of everyone from a junior IC to a senior TL to a VP of data to a head of engineering. Like, I'm seeing this conversation from every single one of those people, these worries of like, okay, I want to bring these tools in, or maybe I already have brought these tools into my stack. What does that mean from a security perspective? What does that mean from a quality perspective? There's some challenges there. So AI does, some of the AI tooling, right, does introduce new vulnerabilities and pressure, especially at large enterprise organizations, especially at large scale. And so how do we close that? And then the quality versus speed. This is a really interesting one. With a lot of the AI tools, especially some of the more front-end focused code gen tools, right? There's a ton of tech debt being created. Today, a week from now, a month from now, maybe that's not going to be it may not be a 4-alarm fire, but it will be a year from now. And we're starting to see some of those happen from a lot of the early adopters of a lot of these code gen tools, right? Is, okay, we've got this, we had a solution, we had an urgent problem, we churned out a solution, and now we need to actually like make it maintainable. And the literal amount of code, the literal proliferation of what I now need to maintain is so large that it's actually a way bigger problem than it would have been a year, 2 years, 3 years ago. So all to say, a lot of exciting stuff to happen here, but this sort of like security and governance and scalability and quality issue still needs to be addressed. And so let's take a minute, zoom back out. We dove really deep into AI and sort of where that's taking us, but let's take a zoom out again and think about the benefits for you and your teams of implementing some of those solutions we talked about to solve or close the front-end gap, and then employ some of the techniques and concepts that we've talked about in real life. And so if you take nothing else away from the presentation today, right, the best way to close this gap is abstracting away low priority, undifferentiated work that is not cutting corners. It really is it is the only path forward. It's the best path forward. And often a lot of that undifferentiated work, right, is a lot of that boilerplate for building front ends. And again, I want to be super clear. There is a lot of complex expert work that goes into an excellent front end, an excellent user interface. But there's also a lot of that baseline stuff that doesn't need to be done every single time, that does not need to have an expert waste their mental energy or take the opportunity cost of turning them away from something that they're actually expert in to go do that boilerplate, to do that setup work, right? And so if you're able to abstract that away with a coding platform or with another solution, right, that is the best way to leapfrog the problem and get right into doing the most differentiated, the most impactful work for you as an engineer and for your teams. And so the benefits, if you're able to do that and really focus on, where your zone of excellence is, focus on your expertise from a teams and organization perspective, this is literally going to make your team faster, right? We think about some of the more value-driven buzzwords, which again, I live and breathe as a product marketer, but I do try to really translate into very literal phrases for events like this, right? Make your teams faster. You can totally do that when you're able to allow folks to not have to context switch that much, to not have to continually build this boilerplate over and over again. You can deliver faster, you can get to the heart of the solution faster, and you can keep shipping at a high velocity without sacrificing that quality. And by doing that, you're able to say yes to more projects. I love this. If you can reduce the complexity of trying to build every single piece of the full stack application, and you really focus right on getting that baseline, getting that boilerplate, that undifferentiated work out of the way, and building quickly, then you can say yes to more. And as you say yes to more, you're able to drive business value by actually shipping more and more applications, by completing more tickets, by meeting your delivery deadlines. But you can also work on the things that your team has been interested in, that you have been interested in. You can start actually being innovative, making time for innovation. All of that needs room to breathe. And as we're moving faster and faster and juggling more, I'm seeing that slip away. And so say yes to more projects, reduce that complexity, and give your team the time to build the innovative stuff that they want to. And then last, you can deliver these good complete apps and projects by ensuring that enterprise grade quality, by focusing on architecting it the right way or investing in a platform that gives you that right out of the box, right? Whatever your particular or preference is for going about that, you are able to dedicate the resources needed to set up all the different pieces of making an application secure, accessible, and excellent without sacrificing speed and efficiency. From an individual perspective, right, you can stay in your zone of excellence and enjoy that deep tea, right? Like really, really go deep and know that you can offload some of that generalization to other folks on your team, to share the burden, to learn how to solve that in different ways, and stay focused on what you enjoy and what you feel excellent at. You can reduce, when we reduce the complexity of the framework juggling and sort of going back and forth between all the different pieces, right? Thinking about that context switching, you can totally stay a little more focused in the actual pieces of your stack and pieces of your development process that work for you. And so you can actually, focus a little bit and reduce the headaches of actually getting from start to finish. And then last, you can build scalable performance software with the skills and people you have today. You can feel a little bit less pressure as the individual, right? That I don't need to, I'm not creating a gap. I'm not creating a weak link. I'm not, letting the whole team down because I'm not a front-end expert. I actually have a way to share the burden of that a little bit and to bring in something like a tool to start getting started on the front end with the skills I have today. And so we're about at time. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A, but I wanted to close today with Retool, right? I'm here as a Retool representative. And again, I love talking about these concepts, and I'm hoping that this carries through in a really natural way because I work for companies that I believe in, right? I actually love the software, and I'm excited to get you guys introduced to Retool if you're not familiar with it. But talk a little bit about how you can activate a lot of the conceptual stuff we've talked about today by, one of the solutions investing in a platform. And so if you've not heard of us, right, Retool, we're a developer-first AI native platform for apps, workflows, agents, software. Essentially anything you want to build, you can build it on Retool. We are the app layer for data teams, for operations teams, for engineering teams, for basically any team that's fielding a lot of requests for software. that has other things they want to focus on. They have an area of expertise, but are constantly being asked to juggle and wear many hats and work within a lot of different systems and processes. And so we offer this platform. We have security and governance built in. We integrate with any of the different CI/CD tooling or parts of your SDLC that you have today and that you'd like to persist. We can plug right into it. You can write code anywhere, but you can also drag and drop with our UI builder with over 100 pre-built components. So all to say, right, we've been around for a little bit. We help automate. We help everything from automating workflows to building agents, mobile AI applications. We really cover all the bases there on what you might want to build. Just launched our agents product last month, right? Or our agents capability last month. It's been really exciting to watch an actual application, an actual way to activate some of the AI excellence, the AI excitement and magic, right? See that actually come to life. We have that built in the platform as well. And so what you get with Retool is the ability to build, scale, and govern apps with one common platform, right? With one layer, one application layer backed by the platform that we've been spending years building up and making super robust. So we've got the security and governance at the very bottom layer, right? We've got dev tooling. We have a super sophisticated development suite that allow you to build this ecosystem of apps and workflows. And don't just take it from me. I have to show this slide. Don't just take it from me. We've got Fortune 500 and startups who all use us as their platform for developing their tools. And so with Retool, right, I want to just close again with driving home what you can do with a platform like us, but with Retool specifically, you can stop that front-end framework shuffle. It's not something you have to worry about with us. We have all these pre-built components. We have a really, truly mixed mode experience that you can come in and build however you want to build. If you want to write code, you can write code. If you want to drag and drop, you can drag and drop, right? If you want to use natural language, we've got that coming as well. So you can build these UIs in seconds. You don't have to learn new frameworks. You don't have to, learn that new framework and have it ripped out of your hands 6 months later when a new head of engineering comes in or a new TL and is like, we're going to rewrite it in this one. You can drop your code anywhere and use the tools that you already know, so you don't have to shuffle anymore. You can also eliminate the need for your engineers to be experts in every part of the stack, right? So we have not just this drag and drop, sort of UI capabilities or we don't just focus on UIs. It's more than a UI company, right? We have a super robust platform that has 70 plus database and API integrations that have built-in connectors to any resource, right? Anything you bring to us, you can start using and hook up to your application, to your agents, right? Immediately. Super exciting, right? You don't have to wrestle with any of that complexity. It is there right out of the box. And so you can actually connect the tools that define your business, right? The context that defines your business to turn that into action-driven, intelligent applications using AI tooling or even building AI applications to speed up development. And then last, right? We are production ready, accessible, secure, and you can build applications that are production ready, accessible, secure, and scalable without dedicated front-end resources with the team you have today. So we have a beta-tested platform. It comes with those enterprise-grade security features. Like I said, you could go back a couple slides to the logos that use us and the scale that they're being used at, right? Like we do have that. We've got that on the market. It's been there for quite some time. And so we protect your sensitive data and ensure compliance. So you can get all of this. You can kind of leapfrog that front-end dilemma, right? Don't have to worry about it. Get started today and really deliver a full stack application without the full stack fatigue. So I'll leave with today, right? Bring your expertise. We love it. Like focus on that expertise. Take your expertise, bring it to our platform and enable your vision. Bring your vision to life. We'd love to help you do that. And so with that, I'm going to close and pass it back over to Katie. I think we've got a couple questions and she'll wrap us up over the next 15 minutes.
That's right. Thank you so much, Madge. That was excellent. I really enjoyed watching you and getting to know about you and the work that you do and your thought leadership. So let's hear from our audience members and kind of dive into a little bit about what they thought and some lingering questions that they have. So the first question that I have here from our audience is, what other context switching trade-offs and challenges do you see engineers making beyond just front end versus back end?
Absolutely. I mean, I think basically at every single decision point, there's going to be an opportunity for that to start happening. So where I'm seeing that happening very specifically in the last sort of group that I was speaking with, right? a lot of different processes have been in place in their organization. They're getting a lot of these requests for internal tools, actually. And so the folks responsible for building those are having to context switch between how this team organizes their data and that team organizes their data and that team organizes their setup, maybe connect all that and integrate what RevOps needs. There's that constant like switching between requirements and setups that they have no control over. I'm seeing that be a really, really sticky, like a strong pain point. And then I also am seeing the context switching of, again, trying to stay up to date on the latest and greatest tools that are on the market, on the latest ways to code. Literally the way we're building software is changing today, and it's changing at a pace that is truly unprecedented. I mean, that we are just on an unbelievably steep slope upward and to the right of the number of tools and the different ways of development that are available today. I'm seeing a lot of, and I'm feeling it myself, right? Like the constant pressure to stay up to date on that while also staying excellent at what, sort of your bread and butter skill set is. That has been on a very personal level, something I see a lot of engineers struggle with.
Some really good points there. Let's move on to another one, though. So this one is a little bit more general. How is Retool more than just a quote UI for X technology, end quote?
Excellent. I really hope some of the presentation I did today answered that. But funny enough, it's something we get, especially because if you check out, not especially because, but if you go to our website, for instance, we have a lot of use cases and templates, and a lot of them are phrased as like a UI for X, because that is often what sort of triggers interest in a tool like Retool. Is like, okay, the topic of today's webinar is very intrinsic to who we are as a company too, right? It's like we have people come in and it's like, oh my God, all right, I'm a full stack developer. I'm trying to build an application. This is not my main, this isn't my core product. This is a request I've gotten from somebody else. How on earth do I just slap a UI on this and shove it back over the team? And I'm being a little facetious, but that's kind of the dilemma that we see. And so all to say, we have a lot of those capabilities. We have a lot of tutorials for that, but it's so much more. I really do. I've said it a couple of times, the like application layer, like sitting in between sort of the platform and the data sources and all the tools that are unique to your company, having a layer that transforms all of that good data and all of your ideas for app architecture into an ecosystem of stuff that you can reuse, of agents, of software, of applications. Like that is who we are. That is who we are today, is that app layer. And we're going to keep working with all of you guys, with all of our customers, with our own sort of R&D to continually improve upon the sort of engine behind all of what makes that possible.
Another question that we got would be, why would I use Retool when I can use a code gen tool like Cursor or Bolt.new to build the front end for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they serve different purposes, right? I think when you're thinking about, especially in the prototyping stage, or even in sort of this, I think I personally use and think of the cursors and the bolt of, I have a problem I need to solve quickly, and it doesn't matter if it persists. Like it doesn't, I don't think about the longevity of what I'm building per se. And when I speak to, a lot of folks who work for agencies or consultants, like that's what they're brought on to do. They're brought on to say like, okay, build this quickly. We need an application out the door. Here are the requirements. They're super minimal. Go. And that's where I'm seeing a lot of these code gen tools used. Now, obviously for like super, dogmatic engineers or folks who want to build a certain way or have that sort of like very narrow niche of building, I think those tools are great. And you can definitely do a lot of really complex building with them. But for the general builder and for the teams, that approach, those tools are more intended and are more effective for that more like prototyping point solution. Whereas Retool, right, we want you to build and are hoping to, facilitate the building of that entire suite, the ecosystem. You build a dashboard, right? You come to us, I want a UI for X. You build a dashboard, but then you move into something else. You build not just a dashboard, you build an agent, you build a process, you build lots of different interconnected tools. So I think, it's, we often see each other in the same spaces, but we're in a very different sort of niche and swim lane.
Mads, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks so much, Katie and team. Have a good one.
Thank you. And thanks to you watching and joining us today. We appreciate your time. We hope you found this presentation valuable and informative. If you have any lingering questions that you're working on putting in the chat right now, please go ahead and do that, and we'll make sure somebody from Retool will reach out to you after the session. Thank you so much for joining us once again during this session with Retool and D-Zone. I'm Katie Bavoso. Have a great day.